Today on the hobby bench, I'll be painting on billboards from Gamecraft Miniatures. So I picked up some 28mm or 1/48 scale billboards from Gamecraft Miniatures. They're a pretty simple MDF kit. They assemble pretty nice, just using a bit of PVA glue. And they come with a pretty fair size base that really makes the frame stand up on. And I really dig it. It's pretty cool. Give you a little bit of idea of the scale here for Marvel Crisis Protocol. And that's really sort of what I picked them up for. Here's a little bit of a dumpster. So it's a little bit larger than that. It's got a little bit more of a footprint. And you can look here that your dumpsters will be size 2. I expect probably these billboards might be about a size 3. It's a little odd miniature because really there's not much more for anything to stand up on. You've got this short area here in front. For 28mm miniatures, it fits well. I probably would have spaced these boards out just a little bit more. They're just a little precarious on that. But for sure, that's something that you're not going to be able to fit on with your Marvel Crisis Protocol miniatures. More on the back there, that's definitely something that you could sort of fit in. And so it's there to sort of break up a bit of terrain. I really sort of liked it too because for some of these buildings that I've got, a large flat area, can set it pretty well and give it a little bit of a different look and make the table look a little bit more alive. Of course, you can also plop it down on the ground. And I think depending how you work on the base, you could have it match in maybe with some grass or on simple concrete. That's what I'm going to be going with. But I'll give you an idea too with these miniatures and with a 28mm, a little bit of cover on there. It's more for probably like propping it up on top. That might be more of a truly blocking line of sight. I think it's more of a light cover probably than something hard. Now, I want to point out here what's sort of interesting, and I'll say on this, is that I put a bit of a gap in here using some cardboard. And you can see with this photograph that I have here, that's exactly what I did. Was I installed a cardboard, just cutting out a bit on the sides and on the bottom, just enough to give a space and allow me to put the front part in and leave a bit of a gap so that I could fill that in. Now I'm going to go ahead and give this just a simple dry brush of just some craft paint. I'm using a lighter gray just to give it a little bit of texture. And nothing fancy here, just to break up the gray primer that I have. And I'm just going to give it a nice thorough coat all throughout. And the key here, obviously, want to get the boards and raise sections and raise parts of the frame and add a little bit more of some definition to that just by giving a dry brush. But a big factor too would be also working on the base of it. So you can see that I sort of broken it up pretty good. And give it a dry brush just to give it a little bit more texture and sort of break up that flat color some. I'm going to add a little bit more weathering using watercolor pencils. This is a pretty cool thing I sort of picked up from the scale modeling crowd. I'm going to use a darker black here just to add a bit more grime. And so on the under sections of it and areas where you think that you might have some grease or some buildup of some dirt, I'm going to go ahead and lay down a coat of this watercolor pencil and just go through areas that I think that might accumulate some grime and some dirt. Maybe some areas that might have some streaking, like underneath these front floorboards. And after I'm done with that, so now that I've got this coat down, I'm going to go ahead and work with using some water to just blend that in. And you're just going to go through this, try to get not too much water and thin it down too much. The idea is just to go over these sections again that you have and work that water in there to just blend it in a bit more. And allow you to draw a little bit more, a few more streaks, and just give it that weathered look. And of course you could probably do this with paints, but you can get a little bit more precise control with the watercolor pencils first. And so I'll be working through the edges that you've got. And the idea here is just to give it a little bit more depth and just give it a tad look of weathering to make it a little bit more lifelike. You can see sort of the final outcome that I have there, adding that watercolor and then blending it in, just adds a bit more weathering to it. Give it a little bit more of the depth that you would have. So something that looks, is rather large. It's got a lot of flat areas, just to add some texture to it. And you can see I worked through a little bit more on the edges there, a little bit more grime. Now, you can see at the bottom, I really want to get some more spotted and some more weathering there. So with that, I actually laid down quite a bit of water first and then went back with these watercolor pencils. And that really just sort of adds a lot more of the ink to that. And then, of course, blend that in a bit more. So for some areas I want to get a little more gunky, a little bit more dirty, that's the way of doing it. But you got to sort of be careful with that. So overall, looking pretty good. I enjoy the look that this grease color has on it. Now, what's sort of cool about this too is the way I have it designed with this gap is that you can fill it in with different things. And on the Facebook page, there are these different billboard ads. I ended up shrinking down to about 60% to make these sort of fit these. These are a little bit smaller than what they have officially for the other terrain. And I laid over it with the laminating sheet. It's a little bit of a glossy look, but the idea is there is to give it a little bit more protection. And there you are. And that's what I like about it. I can just sort of switch them out. I can give it just a little bit more variability with the model and just give it a different look if I want to, if I need to. And what's pretty cool, of course, if I want to make it more, let's say, a sci-fi or maybe something that work out for Zona Alfa, I can, of course, print out something else, something a little bit more different. Even for my County Road Z, I could have maybe more of a modern, less superhero type billboard. And there you have it. Now these Gamecraft miniatures billboards, good kit. There's not much detail, so you really do have to work a bit more to add something a little bit more pizzazz to it. I think obviously if you had something that you wanted to maybe put on a roadside, there's a big flat area that you've got that you can definitely fill in with a lot more grass and turf and a lot more detail. If you want to add a garbage can or something of that sort. I like them because they are rather functional, that you can work with them and adding a little bit more maybe to the base and maybe a bit more weathering. You can use these for a lot of different systems. And for me, the key is to just try to introduce that gap for the front signage that allows you to sort of switch out some different billboard ads that you put up in there, because that little bit there will really make sort of sing and make it really stand out. Overall, great little kit. Can't wait to see how it looks on the tabletop.